I am here to welcome Christian fiction author Melissa Wardwell to the podcast today. And we know each other a little bit, right, Melissa?
Just a little, yep.
Just a little bit.
We're slowly getting acquainted.
We are. It takes time. She lives in Michigan. Is that true? Owasso, Michigan?
Owasso, Michigan, yep.
Wow.
Hey, you got it right.
How are those winters like?
Yeah. I would rather not deal with them. It is what it is. They're calling for a cold one this year, which
I've heard.
I'm not looking forward to.
But your cold and our cold, just as a quick little sidestep, we were down in the Gulf Shores last February, and there was a gentleman that got on the elevator in the condo unit, and he was wearing shorts, and it was cold, and he was wearing shorts, and he had like a t-shirt on, and we're like, wow. He goes, "This is not cold. I'm from Michigan. This is balmy." So we were like, okay, we don't want to spend a winter in Michigan then.
It must have been like 65 to 70 degrees.
Yeah, it was cold for us. I mean, we're in Tennessee. We do get cold as well.
Yeah.
Not cold like Michigan cold, you know.
No.
So there are a lot of Michigan people that go down to the Gulf to get away from Michigan during the winter.
My husband and I have toyed with the idea of being young snowbirds.
Well, why not?
Our youngest, she just turned 16 yesterday. She goes off to college in 2 years. And we're like,
going
south sounds good.
Going south is good. Okay, Melissa. So Melissa, you have written so many books, and tell us a little bit. I'd like to know how you got started. When did you, I got the writing bug at 12. How old were you when you got the writing bug?
So interviews until now, I would have said around that time. I really didn't have a writing bug. But then I was going through some old papers in a bin that we've got stored in the garage. And I found something I wrote in high school that, I wasn't too bad. I'm like, I could do this. And then I found something else. That I had written maybe around 2010. That was the start of a book. I wrote 4 chapters and then I stopped. And I tried to think what happened. And I think that's when my husband went over the road full time. And so I just stopped. I became what I call a single married woman.
Right.
Because even though I had a husband and we could still talk about things, I did everything by myself because he was gone all the time.
So you're a truck driver?
Yes, he is.
Okay. Yeah, that's a hard life.
So I'm guessing I've probably always had the writing bug, but it didn't really come to fruition until 2014. I spend every Tuesday about an hour and a half in the car transporting my daughter back and forth to dance class.
Gosh.
If it wasn't for the dance teacher, it's a Christian dance studio. And I trust the dance teacher. She and I have been friends for years. My daughter adores her. So it's worth the drive. I would,
right.
If it was any other dance studio, I probably wouldn't do it. But anyway, I started seeing this, these pictures, like a movie, play out on the dashboard of my car while I'm driving through the countryside. I drive by this barn almost every single week that it's starting to fall apart, but it's a big barn. It's probably one of the first barns in our county. And a story started to develop. I was seeing a woman entering the door, and growing out of the top of it, or out of the middle of it, was a tree. And then I'm like, well, why would she be looking for some solace, some reprieve? She must be a mother. And so it just kind of spiraled from there. And I met with a friend of mine who has a creative writing major. And I was telling her about the story, and she says, "Missy, you've got to write this down because this is something really cool." And so I started writing it, and we met again, and she read the few chapters that I had, and she says, "Yeah, you need to publish this. This is something that isn't quite yet in Christian fiction." and it wasn't. Like, I was reading a lot of Christian fiction that was not to mock anybody, okay,
Right.
but I was pregnant, I married young, I had children young, and I was seeing a lot of women in books my age that were confused with their life path and were trying to find themselves at 25. And I'm like, but I'm a mom of 3 at 25. I can't find myself right now. It doesn't happen.
Right.
And so I wanted to see that. And so she kind of would send me links of, hey, you want to go here to publish this on your own. Try and find someone to do the cover, find someone really good to do the edits, and which the first editors were not that fantastic. I apologize profusely to anybody that ever bought those first books. But then it just kept going. Like, I wrote one book. It was supposed to be ebook only, which was What God Brings Together. It was meant to be ebook only. And family and friends are like, no, we want paperback. We want it on our shelves. You wrote it.
Right.
We want it on our
Right.
shelves.
Something physical. I mean, really
Right.
physical that you can see.
And so I put it to print, and then I started getting messages. Okay, but what happens next? And why would they do that? And it was amazing how many people didn't understand the concept of forgiveness the way I display it in What God Brings Together. Like, they couldn't fathom the heroine, my main character, female. They couldn't figure out why she would be so forgiving. Well, she kind of had to. If you've got kids, if you hold on to the bitterness,
Right.
you can't move forward. You can't find something new and it be complete. You're
Right.
taking your baggage with you.
And that's what we're called to do. I
That's
mean,
exactly.
not that it's an easy thing. I think sometimes it's like peeling an onion. There are layers, especially if you've been deeply betrayed. I know I've been in that place where with deep betrayal, everything you ever thought was true was not in your life. And it's
Yeah.
layer upon layer, because it's, especially with women, don't
Yeah.
even guys stick something in a box and they're like, well, we talked about that last week and I thought we were done with it. Well, women,
Right.
we're emotional, everything's connected and it comes back up and you got to work through it again. I think God has such a sense of humor to make it so different than our husbands.
Right.
They just, and did you know they have a nothing box? That just boggles
Yes.
my mind.
Yes. My husband does not have much of a nothing box.
Oh, mind it.
He's there's some things from his past that prevent him from really diving deep into his nothing box. But the he tends to kind of check out when he's watching TV. And I don't call that going in a nothing box, because you're still consuming
Something.
But if he's not watching like shows or something, his brain is going 100 miles a minute. I think I inherited the nothing box.
So a little bit of a different,
Yeah, because I could check right out. But the problem is it's hard to come back out of it.
No, I kind of wish I had a nothing box. I would sleep better with a nothing box,
Yeah, I tend to go to sleep pretty easy.
Yeah. Well, depending on what's going on, I don't sleep well sometimes.
Mhm.
So we have all these, and we have these series. So you started indie publishing and you went
Yes.
through that process. But I have to ask you, because you homeschooled your kids, right? Or still
Yeah,
homeschool.
I did, yes.
How did you find time to write when homeschooling? Like, I have a critique partner who's not published anything yet, but she's homeschooling 4 kids. She
Mhm.
can either write or she can market or she can teach. It's like, to do all 3 of those things is really hard. So how did you manage that schedule?
Well, by the time I started writing, the kids were older. But I would evening write after they went to bed. So our routine was we would do school in the morning. We were typically done, except for the one child. He's kind of a procrastinator. We would basically be done by 1, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And then they would go outside and play. I'd clean the house, and then we'd have dinner. And then after dinner was my time.
Because your husband was on the road as a
My
truck
husband was
driver.
on the road, so it wasn't a big deal.
Oh, yeah, so you didn't
My
feel like you were
husband,
taking time from him.
yep. So, when he was, and we still kind of have this routine. He's still a truck driver, but he's not over the road. Excuse me. He's not over the road long haul anymore. He has local, what they call a local route.
Mhm.
He could come home every night if he wanted. But it would just truck stuff. It would just be too much. So he stays out. I pretty much don't really interact with him much for 4 days out of the week now.
Wow.
But at that time, he was gone every evening and every weekend. So I had time to make for me.
Right.
Before I started writing, my evening while the kids were watching movies or playing outside or hanging out with their friends, I was reading. And then when I started writing, that kind of shifted into writing.
Your writing time.
That's yeah.
Are you a night person or a morning person?
I used to be a night person. Now, by about 10, 11 o'clock at night, unless the story is flowing really well, I go brain dead by then.
I can't function after 6. No, literally. Well, we're up at 4:30 in the morning.
Oh, yeah.
So we're up at 4:30, get up, do a Bible study with our coffee, go work out for an hour, 45 minutes, and then jump into it. So by 6 o'clock at night, once I have dinner, I'm worthless.
Right.
I can't even read without falling asleep. So,
well, I've also embraced the beauty of the mid-afternoon nap.
yeah, that would be good. I mean,
like 20 minutes is just all I need to.
Probably a good idea.
Kick it into gear for the second half of the day.
Yeah, well, that's a good idea. So I want to know how your faith connects with your writing, because you said you were reading these books and they didn't have what you would consider a faith message that really resonated with you. So
it wasn't necessarily a faith message, that I just couldn't relate to the characters. Gotcha. It had never been my life. I didn't go to college. I got married right out of high school. I was 19 when my husband and I got married. I was pregnant with our first one by the time I was 21. Or no, shortly after I turned 21. So the concept of going to college, getting a job, and still not knowing what you wanted didn't resonate with me. So, but I had read authors like Francine Rivers, where she has a very strong
excuse me,
biblical faith message in her, woven into her stories, and you don't feel like you're being preached at.
Right.
And I loved that. And there were things that I learned, clearly I would go back and I would I read my Bible all the time, but like they show it, I was seeing it in a different light, how other people walked their faith. And so that was something I wanted to do, is I wanted to show my characters living out their faith and not just going to church.
What about the characters, though, that have to find their faith in order to walk it?
Those are fun ones for me to write. Yeah. In my book, Finding Hope in Savannah, the main character, Liz, her parents were missionaries. And after they died, she was kind of left on her own. And she just spiraled. She walked away from the faith. She did all the things that, we're told not to. Right. And ended up pregnant while in college and alone. And she didn't see where God would even care about her. And I had a couple of friends that were in that exact same boat. And they had shared their journey with me of single motherhood, starting out with no faith and then finding God in the middle of all the stuff. And
don't you think that's where we most often find God, is the middle of our stuff?
That's where I find him all the time.
Well, that's where I found him, was in those
Yep.
stuff. Yeah.
That's when he tends to shine the brightest,
Well,
or when we see him more.
when we're on our, as somebody who doesn't have a strong faith, when you're on your, finally you realize you can't do this on your own.
Yes.
I was a control freak, and I was going to control everything. And then when everything was taken from me, stripped away, I was like, okay, that didn't work out so well.
Right.
So let's go with plan B.
Right.
So I
think a lot of women are control freaks in a way.
and I think I would like to say most often if they are not strong Christians, but I've seen even strong Christian women be control freaks.
Yep.
Like, aren't you supposed to like let go and let God, let him do all that stuff? It would be a lot less stressful and you cause less trouble. But yeah, that's just the way we are. We're human. We fail.
Yeah.
So in your writing journey, from where you started and you were doing a lot of reading and you shifted, how have you changed from your journey? Has God shifted like for my writing journey, when I first started, I wasn't a strong Christian. In fact, I don't know that I could say I was even a Christian. Of course, I was really young, but my idea of writing was, fame and fortune and Nora Roberts and Danielle Steele, because those are the books I read, like that's not happening. No matter what I would do, that's not going to happen. And you know what? I don't want it to, but I think the Lord shifts, your book writing is a ministry of sorts. Am I right?
Yes.
I mean, what you're doing, you're giving back what God has blessed you with, the gift he's given you, you're giving it back to him.
Exactly.
Work. Exactly. So have you been changed through that?
I probably don't feel like it in the moment, but if I look back, probably, yeah, I would say so. Like it definitely, there's a whole lot of what I go through in the moment in my faith journey that's in my books. In the moment that I'm writing them,
right,
it's playing out in the books in some form. Maybe not exactly as I was dealing with them, but the like back to the first book, for example, I had just gone through a season where, well, my husband and I had just gone through a season where we were pretty much emotionally and spiritually divorced. We just coexisted. We lived in the same house. And even though in What God Brings Together, the couple's divorce, I still had to go through the same forgiveness level. My husband didn't betray me, but he was detached.
Right.
And in his own grief, over some things, he became very emotionally detached. And so I had to go through things that I had to learn to forgive him and still live with him and still do things God's way as much as I possibly could. And I found when I read the first draft, going through edits of that book, I looked at it and I said, this is me. I didn't mean to, but this was me. This was me. The character, she's on the floor crying her eyes out, mad at her ex-husband, but she knows she's got to forgive him. I've been through that.
Right.
But it was my current husband.
Right.
So it was, you see, my journey is in these characters.
I think almost as an artist, as a creative person created by God, to have the heart that you have as an image bearer of Christ. I don't know how you can write without there being a portion of your own spiritual walk in your stories.
Exactly. You would have to be completely disconnected, I feel like, to not share parts of what God's done in your life.
Well, and how do you actually have your characters connect with your readers if you can't dig into that deep place? Because if you don't feel it, how do you? Maybe some people can, maybe they can fake it. But, there's been so many times when I've been writing a story that I'm in tears.
Yeah.
I'm writing it because I know or more likely when I'm reading it back to my husband, because he has me read everything I write to him, I end up getting all choked up. And it's not because my writing is all that in a bag of chips. It's because you live through that at some
Yep.
level, and you realize that as you're reading it back, that it's really a deep personal part of you that you're, and maybe that's what makes it so hard as writers, when you have people critiquing your work, because you're laying your heart out there
Right.
for people to stomp all over if they want to.
Right. Exactly. And, you know, the reward though, you know, you caught it, you know, you're writing the correct thing. When you hear back that the characters were relatable, and you had never thought of your marriage in the way that it was presented, or you would never looked at your own Christian walk in the way that this was presented to you.
Right.
And okay, you know, that's why when I sit back and I read that kind of review, I think, okay, God, I'm still doing the right thing.
Right. Well, you know, I know my third book in my first series was inspired by my brother's, who was a Christian, by his suicide. And it was a family coming through that. And he had in the story too, and in real life, my brother had bipolar disorder that was misdiagnosed. And so when I wrote the story, though, and I had to put it out there, I rewrote it 3 times. It was published last, even though it was the first one I wrote, because I had to keep writing it and get through that. But my fear was, here I am laying out there suicide and mental disorder to a Christian community of people that oftentimes will really slam you for even mentioning those things.
Yeah.
I was scared. I thought, okay, I prepared myself for that onslaught. And what came back instead was, thank you so much. Nobody is admitting. They just say, if you just had enough faith, you wouldn't have this problem. If you know, you shouldn't be taking drugs. If you had enough faith, you would get over your bipolar disorder. That they were saying these things to these people that were in church, and they felt lost and alone. And it's like, okay, it's real. And that breaks my heart to think that we can lay that on other people.
Yeah. It's hard. Sorry, getting emotional about it.
I see you crying. So
I live with, without trying to give out too much, I have 3 of the 5 people that live in our house deal with ADHD, PTSD, and one of them has DID, which is dissociative identity disorder.
wow.
There are certain people that if I told them that, they would think that the one with DID is demon possessed.
Oh, for crying out loud.
I mean, because, you know, you hear this. Oh, they're possessed. No, they've been traumatized.
Right.
And this is how their brain has chosen to work with it.
And God's going to use it.
Oh, he's so going to use it.
You know.
And, you know, that's the thing that I've started. I'm a teacher at our church. And our church is charismatic-ish. We have a very big conglomerative group of people that come from the Pentecostal, the Apostolic, those kind of churches. I'm kind of center of the road on everything. If I don't see it in the Bible, that's not it.
Right.
I don't even read very many faith leaders' books, because it's their opinion, it's their interpretation of the word.
Right.
And not that it's bad, but it might not be how I see it.
Right.
So anyway, they will tell me, well, your child's possessed, or you need to get over that PTSD. And it's like, PTSD, DID, it's the result of trauma.
My son has PTSD.
Yeah.
And he has bipolar disorder.
Yeah.
And he has been sexually abused. So he's got a lot of that stuff. And you have to believe that God's going to use their challenges.
Yep.
Because he allowed it. There's a reason for it.
There's a reason.
He's going to use that. And the doubters out there and those that are going to lay judgment. Oh, I could say really, you know, I know where you're going.
This
is why there are so many people who look at a Christian community or a Christian
Yeah.
church and say, why would I, they're a bunch of hypocrites, because, and we're all broken people. The church is made up of broken people. No one is perfect. No church is perfect, because no one is perfect aside from
Correct.
our Lord and Savior. So we have brokenness, but sometimes it boggles my mind that people can be so judgmental and closed-minded about things and not open their hearts to truth. Anyway, we could do another whole podcast on
We
this.
could.
We might have to do that later on down the road, but I want to get to some more of your books though, because
That's good.
you have so many. So you wrote, were there 5 books that you wrote for the Independence Island series for Celebrate Lit?
Yes.
And how did that come about? Where did you start to get caught up in that?
So more faith story. I had just published my 5th book independently. I had to look at the shelf for a second.
How many books have I had?
I had just published independently my 5th book, and it was not as prosperous as I thought it would be. And I knew that my writing was a ministry from the beginning. And so I was sitting at my parents' house and I told them how frustrated I was. I can't produce another book. The stories were there. I couldn't produce another book because I had spent so much on the last one. There was nothing left. And I was just expressing to my parents how disappointed I was, and I was unsure whether or not I was even supposed to continue writing. And my daddy looks at me and he says, "Do you write for the money or do you write for God?"
Good for
him. I write for God. He says, "Well, then you need to trust God to provide what's next." And so I had to leave because at the time I was singing on a church worship team. So I had to leave to go to practice. And I pull out onto the main road and I'm like, "Okay, Lord, if you want me to keep going, you have got to make it very clear and you've got to put it flat in front of my face, because I just don't see how else to do this right now." And the next day, Celebrate Lit had put out a call looking for authors to submit outlines for the Independence Islands series. So I messaged Sandra Barella and Shoshana Havig, and I'm like, "What are you looking for this?" Like, immediately I was getting ideas, but I needed like a little bit of background,
right,
as to the location.
Contact. Yeah.
Can I even do this? Because I've never done anything that's a fictional location. My first series takes place in my home county. So I hadn't done anything like to this scale. And so they gave me some information and I thought, okay, I can do this. And so I submitted it and they accepted it. They said that my character write-up was probably one of the most put together. Like, it was very clear on my plot lines and my location, or the plots and my character development. I believe in setting up the plot. The character development will, if it's developed well, it will push and pull the plot.
Well, because if your character, you have that figured out, you know how they're going to react to a certain, so you throw all that stuff at them because you know what they're going to react to.
I know they can handle it or can't handle it.
Right.
So, and they selected my proposal and here we are. And I'm like, okay, God, we'll just keep marching forward.
So you've got 5 though. Are they done with that series? Are they wrapping it up, or you just?
They are wrapping it up. This is the green books are the last ones. The last book will be Carolyn Miller's, and that will publish, I believe, in middle of December, just before Christmas.
And your book, the one that you just finished, that came out, I believe it came out last month.
Yep, Delicious Devotion.
So tell us a little bit about that book.
So all of my books, it wasn't planned, but all 5 of my books, they start with Beth and Scott. And in Scrumptious Independence, you You see the beginnings of their relationship. And I didn't want to just stop with them. I fell in love with their characters. And the only way for me to continue to keep the not present, ever present Graham, Beth's grandmother, in the stories, I had to keep Beth in every single story.
Right.
And you can't have Beth in every single story without Scott in every story. But I was only hearing parts of their story continue, but I wanted to integrate other characters.
So they're like a part of each one of the stories, but they're not necessarily the central part of each story.
Right.
Okay.
So the middle 3 books have 3 other couples besides Beth and Scott. So, and because it's a community, I guess I kind of likened it to, it's like a TV series, kind of like, what's the big one right now?
There's so many.
Virgin River.
Oh yeah.
Where it just keeps going and keeps going. And, some days you're going to focus more on one couple than the other kind of thing. And that's kind of what it does. So all 5 of my books bleed right into each other.
So do they have to be read in order to make sense? Or are they standalone?
I would say yes, but some readers have said no. So I think it's probably whatever your preference is. I tried to give enough backstory in each book so that you didn't have to, but I think to get the full breadth of it, you need
looks like it's coming into Virgin River in the last season. What fun would that be? Really?
Right. So Delicious Devotion is just the culmination of all the books. It's the end of Beth and Scott's previous chapter and the beginning of their next chapter. If you can't tell from the cover, they get married. So, it's like this part, their singlehood is over. And so they're getting ready to go on to the next part. But it's still full of, there's a lot of family trauma that Beth has to deal with. There's things that Scott has been a main character, but he has been kind of a main supporting character, if that makes sense.
Right.
And this one, he talked a lot. He's a quiet man, and he didn't talk to me very much this entire series. And then this last book, he just vomited everything. And so there's a little twist that I'm sure readers did not plan or did not see coming. So because parts of Scott's past come to his present.
Oh, good. Well,
and
that's exciting for you and the reader.
Yes. This is when I wrote the plot for Delicious Devotion. This was not in it. This was not the plan. This is definitely a surprise for me. But I was just typing along and I thought, oh yeah, this guy, why would Scott have an issue with this guy? And why would this guy focus on Scott to make his life miserable? Well, so yeah.
So one last question. I want to know what's next for you. So you just finished up the Independence Island. Are you working on another book right now?
I did sign a contract for the Swomali series.
Oh, good for you.
So I've already submitted one book. I will start writing. I don't have full use yet of this pinky. So writing is difficult, but
do you type? You type everything, right?
I type and I dictate.
Oh, okay.
So
how you do that? Carolyn Miller does that too. I'm like, I just can't. I have to see the words.
Yeah, I see the words, but I still screw up.
Well, don't we all? I think it have it edited how many times over and still.
Right. There's still mishaps. So I'm working on the Swomali series right now. I'm hoping to have, there's only 3 books that I have to submit for that. So I'm hoping to have those done actually before this year is over with. So that I can start focusing on my next series, which will be mine. Celebrate Lit is publishing it. but it is into all me. I'm not collaborating with anybody else.
Right. So it's your own, your Celebrate Lit will publish it, but it'll be your, like what I do with Celebrate Lit.
Yes.
I don't collaborate. It's aside from this Keeping Christmas.
Yes, that was fun.
That was
Keeping
fun.
Christmas was fun.
That was a fun one.
Um,
Well, so you have a rich writing journey still ahead of you, obviously.
yes, it's by the time I'm done, the last book of my series, by the time that last book publishes, it'll be 2027.
Is that crazy?
It's nuts.
'Cause,
I
geez,
feel like I'm still in 1997.
I look at that too. It's like, okay, when I get done with this series, I'm going to move into this other one. I'm like, well, that's not until 2024. And you just kind of like,
Wait,
it's kind of crazy.
right?
You never know. Jesus might come back before then, and then it'll all be moot. So
You never know.
You never
I'm
know.
definitely, I can't, I've got maybe a couple more stories brewing around. But after that series is over, the series that I'll be publishing after Swamali, I've been brewing that one since I started writing. And I don't have much else after that. Like
well,
there's
it'll come.
There's nothing brewing much right now. So
Yeah.
when I started writing, I really wanted to take my favorite Bible stories and turn them into a little more modern
Oh, that would be fun.
tellings.
Yeah, that would be kind of fun.
So the series that I'll publish after Swamali is based on Ruth and Naomi in the book of Ruth.
In a more modern version.
In a more modern version, it'll still be historic. It'll still have historical fiction into contemporary. And instead of Ruth being the daughter-in-law of Naomi, which that's not going to be their names, but she'll be the granddaughter-in-law. So
you have ideas.
I do.
And you have a ways before you're going to hit that point. So I'm sure something will brew before then.
Probably. Oh, for sure. I'm like, okay, whatever you want, Lord.
That's right. He'll give you the stories.
That's right.
Well, it's been wonderful talking to you today. Thank you for sharing your writing journey, and I wish you the best. And maybe someday we'll talk again, and maybe do something about what we think needs to be done in the Christian community so people aren't so judgmental. Who knows?
I would be all up for that one.
You have a blessed day, and it's been great. Thank you for coming on to Between the Lines.
Thank you, Jennifer, for having me. I appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye-bye.